We are recording. Hey, and I am going to mostly let you give your background, but our topic today is really in broad strokes my favorite, which is marketing for financial advisors and other similar businesses, and in a more narrow cast, you have a tremendous background in live event, and live event meaning online or live in person,
Right.
event orchestration, creating the right feel environment and so forth. Lise, why don't you give everybody a little bit of your background, and then we'll talk about your current company and so forth as we go here as well.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Elise Stoner. I am the co-founder of Custom Strategic Marketing for Wealth Advisors, and I'm also the founder and chief strategist of Fresh Perspective Consulting. Yeah, as you said, live events are my thing, and just because something's online, as we can tell right now, right, there's a little sign up here that says it's live. So usually the terminology I like to use is either digital events or in-person event,
You bet.
because they're all live.
Right.
But I really am sort of in a different phase in my career, taking everything that I learned in the previous parts to help financial advisors. And I also do some work still in the education space of helping people increase what I call the ROM of their moments. An event is a moment. And so many people for so long are like, the ROI on these things just sucks. And I had this moment where I said, you know what? You're measuring the wrong thing. So by working with our clients to increase their ROM, they can maximize the marketing value of this live opportunity.
You bet. You bet. Our ROM return on the moment, if I'm correct. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And with in all those different fields, and of course, we've worked with law firms and some other similar businesses as well, but predominantly, strangely, martial arts schools and financial advisors, which interestingly have all the same problems and all the same needs and all the same preconceptions, it seems like, regarding this stuff. And within the, and I'll use your word, the digital space for meetings, I found there was a trend there for a while on fake live, right? Here's the webinar and pick your time, and really what it is the recording that I'm pretending that it's live. And from whether it's the experience that is the emotional experience and engagement of the participants, or whether it's the sales effectiveness, whatever the sale outcome is, right? Oftentimes it's to make an appointment, or it's just to be excited with the advisor, or it's an opportunity to bring their friends. The pretend live thing, I always felt like it was a bust from day one. Is there's just something that's different about it's a recording, and not that there's not a place and time for recordings. I mean, look at podcasts, are very productive, but trying to have a recording and pretending you're having a live event is two different things. I was involved with, I think we talked about it. I went out to Boise, Idaho, and there's a company you may be familiar with, ClickFunnels, and they were doing a live event promotion, legitimately live, for Dan Kennedy's company, Magnetic Marketing, and they had 20,000 people all live at the same time. But it was very interesting orchestration. I really enjoyed it. I'd never been involved with something quite that big, but they had the stage set up. They had a little bit of a live audience, but mostly you could see a number. You couldn't see 20,000, but you could see a number of the participants live on Zoom screens, just like this. And then you had the discussion forum. You could read. So while you were speaking, you could speak to real people rather than speak to a camera with a teleprompter. And I always find that's, the experience of watching a newscaster or watching a politician on a teleprompter versus the type of event that I'm sure you orchestrate, where it's natural and it's relaxed, perhaps very rehearsed, but is a completely different experience.
It is, but there's also this thing that lies in the middle, which we refer to as hybrid events, right?
Sure.
When the pandemic happened and everybody was caught going like, what do I do now?
You bet.
That allowed this mode to kind of rise to the top, right? The fact that we're even having this conversation right now, live on Facebook, being recorded for a podcast, wouldn't have happened in 2019.
Right.
It probably would have been, oh, you're out in Denver, I'm out in Philadelphia. Maybe someday our paths will cross, but society kind of opened its mind a bit. And the other part of my background that I bring to this, and really why my company is called Fresh Perspective.
Mhm.
I worked in the sports and entertainment field for decades before I kind of took what I learned there and brought it to this space. And one of the areas where I was heavily involved was television production, and television production as it related to live sporting events. And fast forward, as people are like, hybrid, what's that mean? I'm like, have you watched the Super Bowl?
Right.
Right? It's happening live. You're watching it remotely. There are recorded elements to it,
Mhm.
but yet it's extremely effective. And there are guides, we call them play-by-play and color
Sure.
commentators in the sports
Sure.
world, but there are guides who are kind of taking us through this moment,
Mhm.
and that we are sharing it either with others in our space, others in a stadium. So we can very much do that and kind of bring those elements into what we're doing with financial advisors and their events. I'd love to work with someone who had a budget, like some of these television budgets,
Sure.
but there are ways certainly to be able to do that in that same thing. So it's not really as scary as it sounds. And one of my favorite things, quite honestly, you're talking about like the recording. So there's obviously the small studio audience,
Right.
the larger world, like you're talking about your folks in Boise. But one of the things that I like is you can do a pre-recorded presentation and have the presenter back online with you to take live questions.
You bet.
So there's a bit, the magic of television comes to our computers.
Yeah.
And it's nothing to be scared of. It's nothing to look down upon. It's actually kind of bringing all these worlds together, and it's actually extremely effective.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, the event I talked about in Boise, that's what they're doing now, is they're hybriding it. So they have the host, and then they have the presentation, for instance, the one that I did, that they're playing as if it's live, and then they're coming back in and doing live Q&A, and so they're hybriding it now. And as I hear, the numbers I've heard it's been very effective. I had another friend, and he did, interestingly, people had recently filed bankruptcy, and he did seminars in different cities. And he went from traveling from city to city, filling a ballroom and he was very successful with it, to he recorded one of the presentations, and then he would come in live at the front end and at the middle and at the end. And mostly it was recorded, but it wasn't clear, it looked as if it was live, and that worked very, very effectively for him as well. And so, just as you're saying, there's any number of ways to split that middle there.
Yeah, and this is all very technical and important, and a very small part in this ROM cycle, if we will, right? This is actually the production part of this, but the full circle of increasing the return on your moment starts when you are planning the event and understanding your communications and who you want to fill the room, right?
You bet,
Whether it's a Zoom room or a ballroom or a stadium, and targeting that communication to get those people in to hear your message, to tell them what you need them to do, and then having the right follow-up to get them to do that. That's where I work. And Angela York and myself with Custom Strategic Marketing for Wealth Advisors, really this whole idea of event strategy.
Right.
People look at us and think, oh, you're event planners. And my somewhat kind of flippant response is, you know what, because I really don't give a damn what color the tablecloths are.
Yeah, sure.
And what the centerpieces look like.
Mhm.
the thing that I can bring to advisors is this marketing strategy that comes around events. I can pick out your tablecloths if you need me to, but I'm going to probably be the most expensive party planner you've ever had if that's the case.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't want to get involved in that level of trivia. The well, let's go to rubber meets the road. So if I'm a financial advisor, and let's say I'm 20 years in and have an established clientele, but I want to either shift direction or I want to be more effective. And I've done this analysis with any number of advisors recently who, they get okay results from, let's say, live dinner meetings or live presentations, sometimes at the library, sometimes at a local hotel or one thing or another, but they really aren't knocking it out of the park. Go through your diagnosis and your planning, because I was talking with Angela before and then with you, and your system for really targeting in and honing is very sophisticated. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. Yes. So, when I started in this event marketing strategy space, someone's like, well, like, what motivated you to do this? And before I could stop myself, I'm like, my mission is to get rid of bad events in the world.
Yeah.
And what I feel is events are sort of like our dogs, right? And I'm sure you've heard this saying is there's no such thing as a bad dog, just bad dog owners.
Right.
I believe that's the same with events. And what makes something a good event or a bad event really is in the eye of the beholder, in the eye of the attendee. So that is where we start with our clients. We kind of start in two places at once. We talk about who we actually want in this room. And that comes to that advisor who's got a nice sized book and good AUM. But when you ask them who their like ideal client is, who's that person, I want a business owner. Like there's a lot more to that, and really learning about who that person is so that you can motivate them to do the thing that you want them to do.
Sure.
So while we're talking about that, we're also talking about what we call event personality. I alluded to being a party planner. I wrote an article a couple of years ago saying it's called "Don't Call Me a Party Planner."
Yeah.
It talks about what a strategic event marketing is all about. And don't get me wrong, I love a good party. But if your goal isn't to throw a good party, then you're going to miss the mark. So by understanding what your event personality is this a client appreciation event? Is this a prospecting event? Is this an educational event? Is this an event to motivate people to do something? Doesn't usually happen so much in the advisor space, often in like the nonprofit space.
Right.
When you understand what that event personality is, it helps you really understand what it's going to take to make a successful event, because then you're really setting goals and measurement tools to define success. And hey, again, if success is that the flowers match the tablecloths and everybody loves the food, that's awesome. But a lot of people that we find, that falls into the ROI of this event sucks. And I hate it.
Sure. Well, and let's unpack that a little bit. Many years ago, I bought a trade association, and we were doing a big convention, and I had Dan Kennedy, who's a very high profile marketing coach, and his partner at the time, Bill Glazier, down at our office. And in preparation for the event, we must have spent 4 or 5 hours talking about what the theme of the event was going to be. And that tied to the marketing, it tied to the who we wanted in the room, it tied to the feel. And at the time, I kind of felt like, well, we spent way too much time on that deal. But from their perspective, it was integral to, and I came to agree with them, integral to the way the event was presented to the potential participants, the way that it was marketed, the theme in the room, how everything fell together. And they were exactly right. I've gone to with a number of advisors who, it seems like the most common thing is they abdicate to a company who specializes in direct mail or social media to put people in the room. And then their view of what event is I'm going to talk about this technical topic. And then people who like are from this age to this age with this amount of assets, I'm going to try to get them to make an appointment. And they end up with several different problems that I have seen. First, the abdication to somebody who doesn't have the same objectives that they do. And those companies, and some of them are very good. It's not what you do, it's not what I do, but some of them are very good from a standpoint of they can mail, follow up, maybe even do calls confirming getting people in the room, but they don't have the same objective. They know they're going to be judged by how many people are in the room, not that they're right people in the room, not that it's the exact target audience that they want, not that it's people with the belief system, the psychometrics that they've been defined, and perhaps not even people who are going to mesh well with the presenter's style and approach and so forth. And oftentimes advisors will ask me, well, how do I improve my closing ratio? It's like, well, of the right people, your closing ratio is really good, and of the wrong people, it was really bad. So why don't we just get those people out of the room and find more like the ones that you wanted? I know that's a lot of what you start with them as well.
Exactly. And while events are what we call like the rocks in the stream, and the stream is your overall marketing as an advisor or as anybody. So some of the same strategies that you're using for your event, you should be using for your entire marketing.
You bet.
And these things like you're talking about, and we talk with our clients and are speaking at different events for advisors, this whole idea of ideal client and helping people understand, as you alluded to, is ideal client is just not a demographic.
Right.
An ideal client is a combination of what we consider three things: the demographic, the psychographic, and it sounds kind of nerdy, but it's like the attitudes and how somebody sees themselves in their world.
You bet.
It would be psychographics. And then the other thing that we've discovered is life circumstance. One of the first things that we do when we build a customized 12-month marketing plan for our advisors is we do actual interviews with a handful of their ideal clients from their own book.
Right.
We've heard a lot of advisors saying, well, I've talked to them already. Yeah, but when you have someone from a third party come and ask a bunch of what appear to be extremely random questions, you get a lot of different information. And we can build out sort of a general avatar based on those interviews. And what we do is we use that avatar, yes, partially because of the event brain in our heads, but it's the overall marketing. Like, where do they get their information? Who are their trusted sources? Who do they see as their peers?
Yeah.
So that's sort of one part of this bucket. The other part, we really work with our advisors to get to know them.
Yeah.
I know I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day with Rob, and you're talking about one of my favorite subjects, again, in the nerdy term of the unique selling proposition.
Right.
But this idea of like, who are you? Who relates with you? Who gets, Angela teases me all the time, like, is everybody going to get the sports analogies you use? And I'm like, anybody I want to be my client is going to get them. And if they don't get them, they're not my people. And not that I can't help them, but that's who I am.
Yeah.
Getting the advisors to know who they are. And again, through a bunch of series of questions, and understanding, like, what did you do before you were an advisor? And what was your favorite thing to do as a kid? And what do you do now? And, hobbies. And really one of my favorites is that, like, what'd you do before? Because that really kind of pulls the curtain back on them.
Yeah.
So all of this, it's marketing. I don't want to say mumbo jumbo, but it's super important to understand, even when we're talking about events, because if you're putting ads on Facebook and your ideal client doesn't ever go to Facebook, of course you're not going to get them.
You bet. You bet. And let's go back and unpack a couple things you said.
Mhm.
Your people. And I really like that phrase. I focus people not with that term, but in that way all the time. Is one of the first things I'll try to get an advisor to do is go through their current book of business and say, who are your favorites to work with? Who are your most profitable to work with? Usually it's the same. Who are the people that click with you, that you click with well? And then let's figure out what's common about those people, right? And they'll almost always say to me, well, there's no commonality. They're all different careers. I say, no, there is, to use your term, your people, is we want more of the ones that you like, that you click with, that are a good fit, and the ones that really respond to you in the right way. So let's figure out what that is, and the other element is I was talking earlier today is, people think you never talk religion, politics, or sex, I guess is the third thing. But what you need to do is you need to have a ground that you're going to stake out.
Mhm.
And then once you stake out that ground, be that, right? And in many cases, people aren't targeting their local Jewish community because they're part of it, or they're not targeting people by sex or whatever it might be. But the reality is, to the extent that you're going to be attractive to your people, you're going to be unattractive to people who aren't quote unquote your people, right?
Right.
And it seems to me that the industry has this like contest for everybody to be the same. It's, if you go to you go to a meeting or a convention and they're all dressed the same way, they all look alike, they're all speaking the same way. If you have a conversation that's even a little bit controversial, they shrivel up and shrink away. And the ones that I'm always attracted to tend to be opinionated, and they wear their hobbies on their sleeve, or they have a background. One of the most successful examples, I have a good friend of mine, his name is David Phelps. And what he does is he targets dentists because he used to be a dentist. And he has a great backstory of, he was a practicing dentist, bread and butter dentist, and his daughter got life-threateningly ill. And luckily she's fully healthy now, but that interrupted his career. And he had to figure out how to create a living for himself while being able to care for his daughter. And so he's got a great backstory. And now he's I don't know, his company probably does 20 million or more in revenue, specifically targeting dentists who are tired of being dentists, who want to take that next step. And, I've seen it with people's hobbies. I have an advisor who's into Porsches, and he's got a collection of 911 turbos. And I keep saying, why aren't we doing a meeting at the dealership? Why aren't we advertising in the Porsche Club, the PCA, the Porsche Club local newsletter, the regional, the national? Why aren't you the go-to guy? You should be a columnist. You should have, and I want him to get the office where here's the garage of the Porsches, and there's the glass wall, and here's the conference room, right? I mean, go all in, right? Because people who aren't into that will think it's cool, and people who are into that, you'll be their guy or their gal, whatever it might be. It's I don't know, do you have a sense of why they're so afraid of just trying to be the same as everybody?
Well, I don't think they're afraid of trying to be, they're
Well,
afraid
they're
of being
trying to
their
be.
own.
They're
Well,
trying
I
to be,
think, I think a couple things that I
Yeah.
have learned over the couple years I've been doing this. They're not programmed to think that way.
Yeah.
And there's a certain vision, and we say it when you say the word financial advisor, except for your listeners, right? There's a vision that comes into your head.
Mhm.
And everybody thinks in order to be successful, you have to be that vision. And that's not the case. And we found this, we were speaking at a conference last fall, and we were talking about USP, and like, you could just watch some of these advisors' heads like exploding because they're like, no, is that about me? Or is that like my firm? Or is that, and it's like, are people buying your firm, or are people getting into a relationship with you?
Yeah.
So the answer is, if you want them to be in a relationship with you, then it's got to be about you. Yes, you want to be delivering on your promises, that should be part of who you are. And if you're with a firm that doesn't deliver on the promises, then maybe you're at the wrong firm.
Yeah.
But the whole idea is, I think there's this picture in people's heads of what that should be. I think we are moving away from that, as we watch more and more women become very successful financial advisors. I would bet that when I say financial advisor, the picture that pops into most people's heads are not women.
Yeah.
Or they are not Porsche owners, or I was at a conference last year. There was an amazing guy who was speaking who has like tattoo sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, for years, I wore suits and stuff because I had to hide them. And then I realized there's this whole community of tatted folks whose money needs care. And he literally, ripped his sleeves off and is owning that. And that's what we try to do with our clients. Yes, again, we're talking, it's sort of this multifaceted thing all happening at once.
Sure.
We need to understand who your ideal client is. And as we like to say, it's probably not who you think it is.
You bet.
Because we learn that as we do that. We also get to know the advisor and who they are and what their thing is. And how do we kind of meld those two and throw in, quite honestly, a little bit of patience.
Yeah.
And consistency, right? Because that's also one of my favorite things I hear. Oh, marketing doesn't work. No, you're not sticking with it long enough to make it work.
Oh yeah.
Because it works.
Oh yeah, completely.
So there's a lot of little kind of sort of like a witch's brew, if you will, of all the things that have to go in there.
Yeah.
But I don't know why people think that they need to be somebody else. One of my favorite quotes is Dr. Seuss, right? You're you. There's nobody who's youer than you.
Yeah.
And you might as well be you because everybody else is taken.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, and you mentioned it, but to reinforce it is many advisors came into this having a career doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then that becomes a natural platform for, why don't you go get more like what you were in that area. And others have, interesting or different hobbies, or they have hobbies that are shared by many, many, many different people.
Mm-hmm.
And it really doesn't matter. I mean, it can be, in the sports world, we were working with an advisor, and he was a, Texas A&M fan. And
Mm-hmm.
so he has the pictures of the big ass Longhorn cows and the right colors and all of this. And he works his way through the Texas A&M Longhorn alumni and so forth. But I thought it was brilliant, and that doesn't mean you can't be known for your technical expertise, but all of the alphabet soup of designations, the prospective clients, they don't know what that means. They don't really care.
Right.
And they don't really care about how competent they are until they decide they click with you and they like you. And then they want to know that you're competent, but it doesn't go the other direction.
And by building what we call the know, like, trust,
Yeah.
The competency kind of shows itself, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know this person, I like them. I'm learning to trust them because of how they're talking to me and what they're sharing with me, and what others are saying about them and all of that. If they're not going to be coming in and going like, okay, so, show me your actual returns and all of, again, I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not going to necessarily use the right terminology, but that almost comes like, it's almost tertiary or fourth place in this, because it's about the relationship. Time and time again, as we talk to these ideal clients, they say to us, I trust her. Mm-hmm. She's very knowledgeable. He explains it to me in a way that I understand.
Yeah.
He knows where I am in my life right now and where I'm trying to go. Mm-hmm. Like that's the magic.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I've heard it said, and the way I've used it is you want them to feel like you are a fly on the wall at the conversation happening at the kitchen table after the kids went to bed, right? Famous copywriter name was John E. Kennedy years ago. He said you want to get inside the conversation already going on in their mind. And
absolutely.
And that's where the magic happens, is if you have your people, you have the right clientele, you have the right group that you're targeting, you should be able to use their language. You should know what conversations, what their fears, what their worries are. And everything that you do in your, as you said, in your marketing should have the right language to appeal to those people. That's when I know I've put our stuff together right, is, when I'll talk to them, they say, well, it was like you were talking to me directly. It sounded just like the conversation we're having behind the scenes. How did you know? The other element of that I think is so important is that and I wanted to get your opinion about something too. I've had mixed conversations on this one, but the other thing that's so important is the ability to really pick the right audience, as you said, go deeply into the psychographics. But the psychographics, it doesn't have to be a complicated, psychological testing. I always think of it as, who do you work with best and who responds best to you?
Mhm.
And then let's get more like that, right?
Yep.
Assuming that's a group of people that's profitable, right? I mean, you can certainly click with, you can, entertain and enjoy yourself all day long, but it's not the right people for your business. But let's go back to the women advisor phenomenon and the expanding environment. One of the arguments I've been having recently is I've talked to a number of advisors, and one of the conversations was, I'm recruiting Black advisors to work with Black people. I'm recruiting women to work with women. I'm recruiting, and all the data I've seen, that's not the thing that clicks well, right? Is, to me, a very solid, competent, knowledgeable, well-positioned female advisor will probably click better predominantly with male clients and with couples, from all the data I've seen. And they don't need to specifically be targeting it. It seems to me that as a female advisor, that's a self-limiting belief that they should be the advisor for women,
Mhm.
where really, and this is another thing I find with advisors that they don't get. Male advisors with married couples oftentimes will talk to the husband when the decision making is going to be 85% the wife.
Absolutely.
And so they miss the point. I mean, as a sales orchestration strategy, as a live event strategy, as a way to create the relationship, they go at exactly the opposite direction that they should be going, right? If I bring in a husband-wife team who's in their 50s and I give the husband all of the details, they're thinking that he's going to go make the decision or explain it to the wife. And I know that statistically 80% of the decision is going to be made by her, number one. But number two is them sending referrals, being an engaged client, getting multi-generational is dependent more on her being excited and happy to be working with this individual than him. What are your thoughts about that?
We're talking about psychographics. We're
Yeah.
talking about human nature. We're talking about human behavior. Let's take this out of the financial world.
Mhm.
Let's just make this general, like, society.
Yeah.
My husband and I were having a conversation the other day, and he's like, you have all of these friends, and I have a lot of people I work with, but I don't have a lot of friends.
Right.
It's what women do.
You
right?
bet.
And it's not women are talking to women or Black people are talking to Black people. It's about connecting with people
Yeah.
where they are and by nature who they are.
Yeah.
I've talked again with a lot of our advisors, and we talk about client referral programs, and it turns out most of their best referrals are coming from women, just because that's who women are.
You bet. You bet.
So I think it's more about, if we're talking about diversity in a practice, it's about diversity of thought. It's about diversity of connectability, if you
Mhm.
will.
Yeah.
Diversity in who's willing to do, or not even willing, who's good at doing different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that again, we go back to this conversation of like, when you say financial advisor, what do you see? Now we're beginning to see more different types of people as well. We should, because there are more types of people who have resources that need to be invested and nurtured to take care of themselves and their generational folks
Yeah.
along the way.
Yeah. Well, and I there was just a couple months ago, the Wall Street Journal had a feature article, and I forget the stat. I'm going to butcher it, but it was something like 65% of the wealth in the United States is controlled by women, and either controlled by women because, they earned it themselves in a high earning career, or because they they lived longer and the husband died, or through divorce, or whatever it might be. I mean, there's a number of factors, but again, it always seems to me that if I was a 55-year-old male advisor, I would be well suited to really evaluate my sales process, to not to fully include in a married couple, the wife, to really be attractive to women, to be able to explain things, not that women need things explained differently, but they are going to be, in many cases, overgeneralizing, of course, more focused on the relationship first.
Right.
And I see advisors, and you said it a different way earlier. They were asking about USP, and you mentioned me or my company. I see a lot of advisors who get focused on product. I have this thing, this product, and no. I mean, that's like the last piece of the conversation, all the way down to, the very bottom of the list. It's about being interested in the other person, building the relationship, having all the decision makers engaged, having an attractive process through. I go back to, again, friend and mentor Dan Kennedy. I was whining to him a couple months ago, and I said, well, these advisors just like don't get marketing at all. I used your term, they don't think it works. And what his comment was, well, they think in terms of sales and they think in terms of advertising. They don't think in terms of marketing. And I asked him for clarification on that. And what he said was all the things you and I are saying, which is they don't understand that if you're generating leads, you better be generating the right people from the right source, from the right place. And then you need to have an overarching communication strategy that presents you exactly as you are to the people that you want to target. So they think they can go to a lead source and just buy leads, and that then they can pitch them a product and it's going to work out well. And, and some of them are even worse than that. I was seeing the woman who is in charge of the combined, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. And it was a DEI conversation, which I thought was completely ludicrous. But she said, basically, their old approach of just bringing in people and having them do cold calls over and over and over again doesn't work as well anymore, because it leaves out women and minorities. And so they're shifting them to doing cold contacting on LinkedIn as their primary strategy. Well, it was the dumbest article I think I've ever read, because the strategy of just picking up the phone and cold calling the white pages, whatever the current equivalent is, the problem was never that it doesn't work. The problem is it was a stupid strategy to begin with. Right. Rather than positioning yourself as the expert, you're some random person calling to beg for business. And on LinkedIn, the inbox, and of course you can automate all this stuff, but people's inbox is inundated with people begging for business, but it does nothing to position yourself, does nothing to create the USP, and it does nothing to put yourself as the guru on the top of the mountain. And but of course, companies like that, they have no perspective of creating a marketing strategy that's going to drive the appropriate leads into people, and totally miss the boat.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I think about as we're talking about this entire conversation is, this is, to you and I, this is nothing new. I think about when I started my career several decades ago, and I was working at an arena, and our job was to fill the seats for all the different family shows and special events. And that's where I learned about marketing strategy.
Yeah.
And I learned that mom's making the decision of whether we're going to the circus or not.
Oh, you bet.
Dad may make the decision about whether we're going to the truck pull or if we're going to the wrestling event. But we know somewhere in there, mom is approving the quality time, if you will.
Yeah.
Or it's that thing that guys who are maybe not in a relationship are going to do with their buddies. You're buying your marketing based on who you think is going to buy your tickets and fill your seats.
Yeah.
Like it's still one of my favorite marketing. I was involved with the Philadelphia indoor lacrosse team, and they had a campaign that was phenomenal. It basically talked about, again, super fast paced rock music sort of ad, knowing your audience, and said, tickets start as low as $10, but you're really only going to need the front part of your seat. You only need the edge that you're sitting on. And it's just this great vision of like, we'll sell you the whole seat, but you're only sitting on the edge of your seat.
Oh, yeah.
We could buy some of the female skewing radio stations, or we can buy the rock stations. What does that look like? That's what I bring to this relationship with Angela. And I know you're talking with her later this week, where she comes from decades in the financial advisor space. And we met over the pandemic, and sort of was this asteroidal kind of thing where we're doing this. And I'm like, why? Who are you trying to talk to? What does that look like? And she was just like, oh my God, like nobody has ever asked these questions before. We need to do this.
Yeah.
So it's bringing the knowledge and understanding of the advisor space. I don't know the first thing about compliance, but she could write books about it and how, here you go, advisors, and how to do the marketing things that you want to do within the confines and hoops that you need to jump through with compliance. Again, I was listening to your podcast with Rob, and you guys talked a lot about that. And I bring this, like, what's that creativity? Where should we be going to talk to those people outside of what could be considered traditional marketing methodologies?
Yeah. And, and even that compliance realm that's again, one of those things that I find that advisors, instead of looking at it from a realistic standpoint of what they can do, they use as an excuse not to do anything or to do very little. And really, anything that you've talked about, anything that I've talked about, isn't about making earnings claims on specific products. It's not about representing the ROI that that you're getting. It's not about making specific claims. It's about becoming a personality that is attractive to your target audience, and really knowing who your target audience is, and then building that personal relationship that turns into a business relationship that then becomes one where you can show them why you're the credible expert in what you do. And so the fear of compliance is, and it's understandable. I mean, I was talking earlier, you got the Bernie Madoff series on HBO that rekindles that whole scandal, and you've got the what's his name, the crypto guy that just defrauded. It's understandable. The regulators are going crazy and the public is concerned, but that's not anything that we're talking about here. We're not talking about the type of things that would get somebody in trouble. And hopefully, as you said, they're involved with a very credible company that's doing very credible things. What we are talking about is position yourself to the right audience in the right way. And there's no need to be milquetoast. There's no reason to be the same as everybody else for any possible compliance issues.
And here's the other part of that. I completely get the fact that there's a reason I am not a financial advisor, and there's probably a lot of really good reasons why a lot of financial advisors are not marketing professionals. So this fact of like I said, I feel like for what Angela and I bring to the table, we kind of bring that best of the both worlds in to be able to calm any fears, help kind of walk that road. And as we always like to say, letting us do our job so you can do yours.
Sure.
Because we talk to a lot of advisors, I want to do marketing, like I know I'm supposed to, but like when, how? And I'm like, when someone says to me, for example, tell us about your ideal client. Again, I go psychographics. Somebody who believes in a village is our ideal client. Somebody who, I love marketing and I'm interested in marketing, as they like to say, but I'm willing to like work with somebody else who does it better and brings decades of experience. Like I know where the bodies are hidden, so to speak.
Yeah.
I know where the potholes are. You as the advisor don't have the time or the energy to be messing with that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think we work very hard to practice what we preach. Right. So I can tell you about my ideal client.
Yeah. And I might phrase it differently. I tell them all they want to know enough to be able to effectively delegate, but not be ignorant and abdicate. And I'm sure what you encounter, what I encounter, are advisors who abdicated to somebody who was, I not too charitably call it the bozo explosion. There's, an awful lot of people out giving advice that don't know what the hell they're talking about. And or you end up with the agency problem of what they think they're going to be judged on is different than what the advisor is trying to accomplish. So that you end up with a gap in expectations. And so what I always try to get with our clients is, I'm not telling you have to do the physical labor. You don't have to get inside of Google and understand the algorithms, but you do need to know what a good outcome is if you delegate that piece to an agency. If you're delegating LinkedIn and Facebook, you need to know what your outcomes are. What's a good opt-in rate to appointment rate to new client ratio? What can you afford to spend for a new client? Therefore, what can you afford to spend for a meeting? What can you afford to spend for an opt-in? Are they hitting your numbers? Are they not hitting your numbers? And what I find so many times is advisors think of themselves as either a planner or a salesperson, but they don't think of themselves as a small business owner, where they've got to understand the processes enough that they can then hand it off to either an employee or to an outsourcer who can then do it for them. And that's something I learned very early on is I remember I hired, it was probably the highest profile, most expensive ad agency in Colorado at the time. And my instincts of what they should be doing were completely at odds with everything they were doing. And by the time it was done, all of the stuff that I was creating worked much better than the stuff they were creating. And I was at the time, I was doing an MBA. It was an executive program, and unusual for such things. The marketing director had been involved with the Coors Silver Bullet campaign, Passport Radar Detectors, big stuff. And I took all of our advertising and laid it out. Ron Gist was his name. And I laid it out to Ron and I said, which of these do you like better? And it was a wonderful lesson because I laid out all the stuff the ad agency did and all the stuff that I did, thinking he was going to like their stuff because theirs was more professional. And he looked at it and he goes, which one pulled better?
Right.
I said, well, this one pulled better. He goes, oh, I love that one. I was like, that's the right question, isn't it? Which one brought the right people in? Which one closed it well? But again, the mistake I think gets made is an advisor has to know enough about what you do, about what I do, about what an outsourcer would do. And I'm more in the mode of training them enough that they can hand it off to other professionals. But they have to know enough that they can delegate effectively and not lose control over their business. And they have to be focused on, and I see this happening, some very big advisors, they've got, 200 million, 300 million assets under management. They've got staff, but they tend to abdicate to their staff. They hire somebody to do a role, and then they're mad at them all the time that they're not accomplishing what they want to accomplish. They don't know how to effectively delegate.
That's a leadership issue. I mean, that's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah.
About a leadership, but I love what you said because we talk about this all the time. We're all small business owners.
Yeah.
my business may be marketing, your business may be marketing. The people who are watching today, their business may be advising and planning and helping people reach their financial goals. We're all small business owners. There's a lot of things that we share. There are some characteristics that we share. It's just, there's obviously some other big differences. And again, those are the people that we get it's not even so much we love to work with. We do love to work with, but we can get the best results for them because they have that view of the world.
Yeah. Hey, Elise, we've been going on for quite a while now. It goes quickly. I think it's been a great conversation. Tell everybody a little bit more about what you do and how to contact you if they're interested in your company. Custom Strategic Marketing for Wealth Advisors is the correct name of the company.
Absolutely. And the best way to kind of learn more and to build the know, like, and trust, I know today is a really great start. We have a business page on LinkedIn, Custom Strategic Marketing for Wealth Advisors. Come and like that and follow us. We share all kinds of tips and ideas from the real world and things that we've done.
That would be that I'm
and there it is.
Using as a crib sheet as we go.
Excellent. If we're talking a lot about events. If you have some more questions about events, drop us an email at strategicmarketingforadvisors@gmail.com. And hopefully we'll have that in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll have everything you sent me in the show notes as well.
Okay, great. And if people want to set up a consultation, we do have a special deal for people who have stuck with us this long, where we can help save some money and really also learn about what you're doing and talk about these things like ROM and event strategy.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, this has been a pleasure. And it's interesting. People are like, you're both marketers. Why would you have this conversation together? I'm an analogy girl, so forgive me.
Go right ahead.
The analogy I love to use is we've all been to Baskin Robbins, right?
Yeah.
There's 31 flavors in that case at any given time. It's all ice cream, but some speak louder than others to the individuals. So Stephen and Angela and I are different flavors of ice cream in your ice cream case. So let's have an ice cream party.
Yeah. And I've said it differently before. The people at the very top are always looking for a slight edge, right? Mm-hmm. Is oftentimes they're not going to get one idea that's going to triple their results, but they're going to get a whole bunch of 5% ideas. And from the standpoint of other people who are kind of in the same the same niche doing similar things, is I find the really sharp people either work with a number of different people in series or parallel, and are always looking for that slight edge. And there's no reason, if it's the bozo explosion types that are concerned about competition because they don't want somebody to interact with somebody and figure out how clueless they are. But if you know your stuff, you're not concerned about that in any way, shape, or form.
Exactly.
Hey,
Thank you so much.
It's been great, and I hope to. I know I'm going to talk to Angela, and then hopefully we'll get all of us together sometime soon as well. Oh, and I sent you a copy of the book. Did you get it? Good. Well, any good takeaways from that? I could.
I will. Full disclosure, it's a bit textbook.
It's thick. Yeah.
So I've been kind of like dropping in and out of it.
Yep.
But I think it's something that, it's got a lot of great information in it. And if people want to talk to me or talk to you or talk to Angela about what they're reading, it's awesome. It's a great starting point.
I think you'll find it very congruent with what you're focusing on. So that's why I ask. Okay. Well, thank you very much.